Hey everyone, Misha here with a very special indoor nature break today. We are talking about 3 things you can do in order to bring the outdoors inside. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, for one thing, we have studies coming just to us from all over the world, University of Edinburgh, Berkeley over in California, and lots of research from Japan going back to the 70s and 60s actually, about how good nature can be for us. It can lower our cortisol levels, which basically means it helps us calm down, chill out, really be at peace. And that is super useful if you work in the type of high stress office environment that I used to work in, or if you just want to bring some of that beautiful, like calming, wonderful energy into your home or any other place that you might be. So these vary in levels of complexity. We have some that are really easy and some that might take a little more effort on your part, but hopefully this video will give you some ideas on how you can bring nature indoors. Okay, so let's get started. One of my favorite ways to do that, and you can see I have this little altar set up behind me, is to just get some plants. So make sure they're real. That's really important. People have this tendency to get like rubber plants and plastic plants, and I understand sometimes we're in places where maybe it's a little dark, maybe there's not as much sunlight, maybe you don't even have a window, but I promise you there are plants that can adapt and thrive in those types of conditions. And although the plastic plants are pretty and don't require as much maintenance except maybe dusting, it's much better and more uplifting and many more, I guess you could say, effective benefits of having a real plant. So this is my little friend. This is a sansevieria. It's a type of mother-in-law's tongue. It's actually a shorty. It's a dwarf, and it's been growing in this pot for almost 2 years now. It's super happy. The pot is one I picked up at Goodwill. It's not even really a pot. It's just this like neat little brass container. And because this guy doesn't have, it'll grow on runners, but it's actually pretty happy in this pot. So I just give this guy a little bit of water, maybe once a week, and it thrives. I've had this plant in a room that stayed dark most of the day. It thrived. I've had it in a room with lots of light. It thrived. So for those of you that are like me and maybe don't have the greenest of thumbs, I promise you there are lots of different plants out there, especially houseplants, that are super beautiful and can give you a little bit of that feeling of the outdoors inside. This is another plant that I picked up when it was super tiny. It was in like a tiny little pot. It was super cheap, and I put it in a bigger pot and it has just flourished. And a neat thing about this particular one too, it seems to not freak out if the air conditioner isn't running all the time. It gets super hot here in Florida. This guy seems to thrive. And so part of it is just experimenting and see what works well in your indoor area. But having live plants in your space is a wonderful way. They do help with clearing the air. Of course, they produce oxygen. Plus, they're just beautiful to look at. Look at the difference between this one, and I'll show you up close. You can even see the leaves have these really beautiful variegations on them. So just often neat to look at too. And this guy, I don't know if you can see or not, but it flowers, which we had no idea when we got this plant, but it's actually put out quite a few flowers, which is really neat. So I know getting plants indoors can be a little cost prohibitive sometimes. So maybe your friends have some that they're willing to give cuttings to you. Things like pothos and spider plants are super easy to take cuttings of. If you're local, hit me up, because my backyard is almost all pothos that's come in from other people's backyards, and I am happy to give you cuttings. And just look around. Sometimes you can even find pretty inexpensive plants at some of the big box stores, and you can bring them in. I like getting them in different sizes so I get kind of a jungle look. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is bring in some food that really helps you feel like you are working with some of the plant allies. Now, things like vegetables and fruits are great, but you can take it to another level if you do. So I have my little cup of tea here. And this tea that's here came from plants from my garden. So it's one thing to buy really awesome, nutritious food in your grocery store. For sure, that's awesome. But if you can keep some plants in your garden that you nourish and you really connect to, I like to go out and sit with mine. I totally talk to them. I sing to them. I whistle to them. And I find that when I am not outside, having those plants in my tea really helps me feel connected. And of course, there are many, many, many different medicinal benefits of a lot of plants. So whatever you're putting in your drink, make sure you check those out. But that's kind of a really nice way. If you have a garden, you can bring them in. And if you don't worry. There are all sorts of teas out there that can really help you feel connected to the earth. And one of the things, like I said, food is really awesome. It's an awesome way to do it. But at my old high stress job, I didn't always even get a lunch, but I could have a cup of tea. And that was something that was really accessible to me, even if I was not able to get the best nutrition or I couldn't cook for myself at the job. So if I wasn't able to bring in food for myself, if I couldn't go out and get it, and if I didn't have anything in the fridge or freezer, having a cup of tea really helped me feel like deeply grounded and connected to nature and the plants. And it's super simple, right? I feel like we can all boil water and drop some tea in there. I like to look for not just like a green tea or a black tea. I really like to look for some of the teas that have different types of plants in there. So things that are considered infusions or tisanes that have fruits and things like peppermint, lavender, and even the calendula, things that are a little bit more outside the box. So passion flower, different types of herbs, damiana, different types of herbs. Yeah, for those of you that know herbs, like, she's naming all the nervines. Yeah, because I needed that calming, soothing, but even things like dandelion, burdock, things that are good for the digestion. I used to find that drinking the teas that were really rooted and grounding would help me when it was really a hectic day. So if you're not able to put plants in your world, just having a little cup of tea can be a huge benefit. And if you know your plants, actually the tea I'm drinking right now has plants in it that I personally harvested. So that's actually kind of a little added bonus. Now, so that's tip number 2. My other favorite way of bringing nature indoors is having different pieces of nature that I collect out on my travels. Before I even say this though, for any of those of you who might be watching who are land managers or conservationists, I want to definitely give a nod to the fact that you need to be really careful what you're collecting and where you're collecting it. So if you go into a place like a national park or a county preserve, they may have rules against collecting. And while I realize that it may seem kind of, strict to not allow people to pick up one feather or one shell, remember some of these places may have thousands of people coming in. And if we all did that, of course, it would have a huge impact. So I like to look for things that are in my backyard and places like the beach that things wash ashore and, maybe later they'll be washed away. And I also really love to get crystals from my different friends. So on the table, I have a couple crystals, which I love because those make me feel deeply connected to the earth. And of course, different crystals have different properties, so you can incorporate that. And then I have things that I found out in nature. So here's a feather that I found. Oh, here's a really cool piece of driftwood. So this makes me feel very connected to water, right? Because this is a piece of driftwood. It actually still has that look was, it has sand on it. Like, oh, it feels so good. And then so we've got earth, we've got water. Sometimes if I want to incorporate fire, I'll take pieces of burnt wood. Like if you find a tree maybe that has been hit by lightning, sometimes you can take the charcoal, or if you have a fire, you can take some of the charcoal from that. My feather is a connection to air. And again, in some places in the United States, it's actually illegal to collect feathers. So definitely check on your state and local regulations. But I will tell you, a lot of that has to do with which birds are migratory and which are not. And usually one feather is typically acceptable. So keep that in mind. And then finally, this is just kind of a fun one I found. This is a wasp nest. I know if you're gonna pick a wasp nest, make sure they are totally empty. But I love this one because each of these items has a different symbolism to me, and the wasp nest, like this, really represents community to me, and that is something that I find very important, and I really like to reference and reaffirm and be cognizant of it in my life. So I have a little wasp nest. So you can do this with shells, you can do it with stones, you can do it with leaves, you can do it with like pine tree needles, whatever is, flowers, of course, right? So whatever is beautiful in your world that you happen across. Like I said, I like to start with my own backyard, kind of see what's out there, what's blooming. I've found feathers in my yard. I've definitely found all sorts of cool plants growing, sometimes even bones. Bones are pretty cool if you have a skull that you came across in your travels. Snake sheds are great too. All of these have symbolism, kind of culturally and historically and magically, but they also probably have some symbolism to you as well. And you know, when we have these places where maybe we don't have a lot of space to have a plant or something, sometimes it's nice to just have a flower sitting there, maybe a crystal, maybe a shell that you found that just really resonates with your heart. So those are three ideas that hopefully will give you some insight on how you can bring nature into your indoor world. And again, I'm Misha from Cypress Pillar Healing Arts. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a like and smashing that subscribe button because it does help us, and I'll see you next time.
Here's an example of bringing the nature indoors. You can see everything we talked about a little bit closer up and get an idea for how you could set up a similar area in your space.